The gunshot echoed through Broken Ridge Valley like thunder across an empty plain, jolting Nora Sullivan from her restless sleep. 19 years on her father's ranch hadn't prepared her for solitude, but 3 months after burying him, she remained in their modest cabin, alone except for memories and the howling wind that seemed to mock her isolation. Arizona Territory, 1885. Nora peered through the cabin window at the dusty landscape, illuminated by the first golden rays of dawn. The single shot had come from somewhere beyond the creek that cut through her property. Probably just a hunter, she told herself, though hunting season was months away. She moved about her morning routine with practiced efficiency, stoking the fire, brewing coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and cutting a slice of yesterday's bread. Her long auburn hair was hastily pinned atop her head, loose tendrils framing a face weathered slightly by sun and wind, but still undeniably beautiful at 22. The isolation sometimes felt suffocating. After her father's passing, most folks from town had offered condolences, brought food, and made promises to check on her. Few had kept their word. Women alone on the frontier were viewed with either suspicion or as prey. Nora was neither. Her father had taught her to shoot straight, manage the small cattle herd, and fend for herself. But he hadn't prepared her for the loneliness. As she stepped onto the porch to collect kindling, she froze. A man sat on the ground about 30 yards from her cabin, his back against her oak tree. A stranger. His head was bowed over an open book. Nora ducked back inside, emerging moments later with her father's Winchester. Keeping the rifle trained on the stranger, she approached cautiously. As she drew closer, she could make out more details: a weather-beaten Stetson, a blue cotton shirt beneath a dusty duster, and worn leather boots. He appeared to be reading a Bible. "You're trespassing," she called out, keeping her distance. The man looked up, revealing a face younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25 or 26. His eyes were the color of a stormy sky, intense but not threatening. A thin scar ran from his left temple down his cheek. His dark beard was neatly trimmed. "My apologies, madam." His voice was low, measured. "Name's Nathan Everett. I meant no disrespect. You're on Sullivan property." "I know." He closed the Bible carefully. "I've come to pay respects. Martin Sullivan saved my life once." Nora's grip on the rifle faltered slightly. "My father," Nathan nodded solemnly. "Yes, madam. I heard of his passing when I returned to the territory. I'm sorry for your loss." Nora studied him suspiciously. "How did you know my father?" "He pulled me from the Saguaro River during the flood of '79. I was just a foolish kid who thought he could cross during a storm." A rueful smile touched his lips. "He dragged me to safety, fed me, and let me stay until the waters receded." The story had the ring of truth. Her father had often disappeared during storms to check the boundaries, returning hours later soaked to the bone. He'd helped many travelers over the years. "Why are you sitting outside my home with a Bible instead of knocking on the door like a civilized person?" she demanded. "Didn't want to frighten you." He gestured to the morning light. "Planned to approach after sunrise." "Was reading a passage your father showed me when he rescued me. Psalm 69. Nora's throat tightened. Her father's favorite, a prayer for deliverance from the floods. After a moment's hesitation, she lowered her rifle and approached the tree. Without saying a word, she sat beside him. Neither spoke for several minutes as the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the rugged landscape in golden light. "You're alone here?" he finally asked. "I manage," she replied curtly. Nathan opened the Bible again, his fingers finding the worn page with practiced ease. "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters and the flood sweeps over me." The familiar words washed over Nora, bringing both comfort and fresh pain. She had read this passage at her father's funeral, her voice barely holding steady as rain pelted the small gathering. "Are you running from something, Mr. Everett?" she asked abruptly. His eyes met hers, unflinching. "Not anymore, but I have been." "And what brings you to my doorstep, besides paying respects to a man 6 feet under?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Direct like your father, I'm looking for work. I heard in town that Sullivan Ranch might need hands." Nora stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Sheriff Mackenzie mentioned you might be selling. Said you couldn't manage alone." Anger flashed through her. "Sheriff Mackenzie should mind his own business. This ranch isn't for sale." "Never said it was," Nathan replied calmly. "But if you're keeping it, you'll need help with the herd." Nora stood abruptly. "I don't need anyone's help, Mr. Everett." He remained seated, looking up at her with those storm cloud eyes. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Miss Sullivan. Even your father knew that." She wanted to argue, to send this stranger with his Bible and his memories of her father away. But the truth of his words stung. The small herd of 30 cattle was becoming increasingly difficult to manage alone. The spring roundup was approaching, and without help, she'd lose calves to predators and strays to the open range. "1 week," she said finally. "I'll give you work for 1 week. After that, we'll see." Nathan nodded, rising to his feet. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. "That's fair. The bunkhouse is around back. It's not much, but it's shelter. I've slept under worse." Nora turned to walk back to the cabin, then paused. "Were you the one who fired a shot this morning?" He looked surprised. "No, madam. Haven't fired my pistol in weeks." The answer unsettled her more than if he'd confessed. If not Nathan, then who was out there in the hills surrounding her property? "Breakfast in 30 minutes, she said briskly. "I expect you to earn your keep starting today." The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Nathan proved himself a capable ranch hand, fixing fences, checking on the cattle, and repairing the leaky roof of the barn without being asked. He worked from dawn until dusk, taking only brief breaks for meals, which they ate mostly in silence. On the third evening, as Nora prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread, she found herself watching him through the window. He sat on the porch steps, Bible open on his lap, just as she'd found him that first morning. There was something about his stillness that intrigued her, a man comfortable with silence, with solitude. "You read that book a lot," she commented, bringing 2 plates outside. Nathan accepted the food with a nod of thanks. "It's been a companion when I had none other." "You've been alone a long while." "Most of my life." He ate a spoonful of beans before continuing. "My parents died of fever when I was 14. Worked cattle drives after that, then did a stint as a deputy in New Mexico Territory." Nora settled beside him on the steps, careful to maintain a proper distance. "A lawman? You don't strike me as the type." "Wasn't very good at it," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Too much gray in a job that folks want to see as black and white." They ate in companionable silence as the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. In the distance, coyotes began their evening chorus. "Your father spoke of you, you know," Nathan said after a while, "when he pulled me from that river. Said he had a daughter who'd have his hide if he didn't come home, so I'd better cooperate with the rescue." A smile touched Nora's lips. "That sounds like him. He showed me that Bible passage, told me God doesn't save us from going into deep waters, he saves us when we're already in them." Nathan's voice grew softer. "That stayed with me through some dark times." Nora found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw beneath his neat beard, the scar that hinted at violence in his past, the eyes that carried both sorrow and resilience. For the first time in months, she felt the wall around her heart cracking ever so slightly. "What dark times, Mr. Everett," he hesitated, setting his empty plate aside. "War leaves marks on a man, Miss Sullivan, not all of them visible. You fought in the war. You seem too young." "Not that war, the Apache conflicts." His expression darkened. "I was stationed at Fort Bowie, saw things that haunt me still." Understanding dawned. The government's ruthless campaign against the Apache had ended only a few years earlier, with Geronimo and his band still fighting for their freedom. Stories of atrocities on both sides had filtered through the territory. "Is that how you got that scar?" she asked quietly. Nathan's hand instinctively touched his face. "No. This was from something more foolish, a bar fight in Tucson when I was still green and thought proving myself meant accepting every challenge." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Nathan was on his feet immediately, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Expecting visitors." Nora shook her head, rising to stand beside him. "No one comes out this way without reason." 3 riders approached through the gathering twilight. Even in the fading light, Nora recognized Sheriff Mackenzie's substantial frame on the lead horse. Flanking him were 2 men she didn't know, hard-faced strangers whose hands rested too casually near their weapons. "Evening, Nora," Mackenzie called as they drew closer. His small eyes swept over Nathan with obvious suspicion. "I see you've got company." "Sheriff," she acknowledged coolly. "What brings you out so far from town?" Mackenzie dismounted with a grunt, his considerable weight making the motion awkward. He was a bull of a man in his 50s, with a walrus mustache and a perpetual sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Heard you had a visitor. Thought I'd check on you, being a woman alone and all." His tone suggested concern, but his eyes told a different story. "As you can see, I'm fine." "Mr. Everett is working for me." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Funny, I don't recall introducing you to." Nathan stepped forward, offering his hand. "We've met before, Sheriff, though you might not remember. I was just a boy then." Mackenzie ignored the outstretched hand. "What I remember is you were asking mighty particular questions about the Sullivan place in town." "Just looking for honest work," Nathan replied evenly. One of the riders spat tobacco juice onto the ground. "Awful convenient you showed up right when this property might be coming available." Nora stiffened. "My property is not coming available, Mr. Hargrove," the man supplied with a thin smile. "James Hargrove. My employer has an interest in this valley." "Your employer being Mr. Whitmore, I presume," Nora said coldly. Richard Whitmore had been trying to buy up every ranch in the valley since striking it rich in silver. Her father had refused his offers repeatedly. "Mr. Whitmore makes fair offers," Sheriff Mackenzie said. "With your father gone, you should consider it, Nora. This is no life for a woman alone." "I've made my position clear, Sheriff. The ranch is not for sale." Mackenzie's expression hardened. "Things happen out here, accidents, cattle rustling. Would be a shame if trouble found you with no one around to help." The threat, thinly veiled as it was, hung in the air. Nathan shifted subtly, positioning himself between Nora and the visitors. "Miss Sullivan isn't alone, Sheriff," he said quietly. "And I suspect the county judge might be interested to hear about law enforcement making threats against property owners." A tense silence followed. Finally, Mackenzie forced a laugh. "No threats here, Everett, just friendly advice between neighbors." He turned to Nora. "Think about Mr. Whitmore's offer. $20 an acre is more than generous." "Good night, Sheriff," Nora replied firmly. After a moment's hesitation, Mackenzie remounted his horse. "We'll be seeing you, Nora." His gaze shifted to Nathan. "You too, Everett." The 3 men rode away, dust billowing behind them in the twilight. That wasn't a social call, Nathan observed once they were out of earshot. No, Nora agreed, her mind racing. Whitmore's been after this land since he discovered the watershed runs through the eastern section. With control of the water, he controls the valley. And your father wouldn't sell. Neither will I. Determination hardened her voice. This land is all I have left of him. Nathan's eyes met hers, understanding and something deeper reflected in their depths. You know they'll be back. I know. Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. They've been hoping I'd give up and leave. Now they're getting impatient. That shot you heard the other morning. A warning, probably. She hugged her arms around herself. Or someone watching the property. Nathan's jaw tightened. You need more than just a hired hand, Miss Sullivan. You need protection. Are you offering, Mr. Everett? I am. If you'll have me. Their eyes held for a long moment. Nora realized she trusted this man, this stranger who had appeared outside her cabin with a Bible and memories of her father. Trust was not something she gave easily, especially to men. Why would you risk yourself for land that isn't yours? For someone you barely know? His expression softened. Your father once risked his life for a foolish boy he'd never met. Seems fitting I'd do the same for his daughter. That night Nora lay awake, her mind whirling with uncertainty. Nathan Everett was an enigma, part cowboy, part philosopher, with eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. And now, he'd placed himself between her and danger. She wondered what her father would think. Martin Sullivan had been a good judge of character. If he'd saved Nathan's life all those years ago, he must have seen something worthy in him. The week passed quickly. Nathan proved invaluable around the ranch, bringing in strays, doctoring a sick calf and reinforcing the corral. Each evening they'd sit on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes sharing comfortable silence. He told her stories of his travels across the territory, of the characters he'd met and the lessons he'd learned. She found herself looking forward to those quiet moments as the day's labor ended. On the 7th day, as they finished the evening meal, Nora realized his trial period was over. Tomorrow marks a week, she said, watching his reaction. Nathan nodded, wiping his plate clean with a piece of bread. It does. You've proven yourself useful. A faint smile touched his lips. High praise indeed, Miss Sullivan. Nora, she corrected. If you're staying, you might as well use my name. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, followed by a warmth that made her heart beat faster. Nora it is, then, and I'm Nathan. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, a vicious spring tempest that shook the cabin's sturdy walls and sent lightning dancing across the sky. Nora lit extra lanterns against the darkness and added wood to the fire. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She grabbed her rifle before answering, then relaxed when she saw Nathan, rain dripping from his duster. Sorry to disturb you, he said, water streaming from his hat, but the bunkhouse roof has started leaking something fierce. Thought I should let you know before the whole ceiling comes down. Nora peered past him into the raging storm. You can't stay out there tonight. Come in before you drown. He hesitated, clearly conscious of propriety. Don't be foolish, she insisted. It's just a roof over your head until the storm passes. Nathan stepped inside, removing his dripping hat and coat. Despite his efforts, he was soaked to the skin. Nora handed him a blanket. You can sleep by the fire. I'll make some coffee to warm you up. As she busied herself with the kettle, she was acutely aware of his presence in her small cabin. It had been just her alone in this space since her father's death. Having Nathan here felt like both an intrusion and a comfort. Your father built this place? He asked, looking around at the solid log walls. With his own hands after my mother died. I was only 5. Nora poured the coffee and handed him a steaming cup. He said he needed a fresh start, somewhere my mother's ghost wouldn't be around every corner. Did it work? Nora considered the question. In some ways, he never stopped loving her, but he learned to live without her, taught me to be strong, to stand on my own. You certainly do that. There was admiration in his voice. Most women would have sold and moved to town after losing their father. I'm not most women. His eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. No, you certainly are not. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, a different kind of electricity charged the air between them. Nora was suddenly very aware of how improper this situation would appear to others, a young, unmarried woman alone with a man in her home, after dark. Yet she felt no fear, only a strange fluttering in her chest when Nathan's gaze lingered on her face. "Tell me about your life before you came here," she said, breaking the tension. Nathan set his cup down and leaned back in his chair. "Not much to tell that's worth hearing. Drifted a lot, worked where I could, fought when I had to. And the Bible, when did that become important to you?" A shadow crossed his face. "After Fort Bowie. After I'd seen the worst men can do to each other." He stared into the fire. "I needed something to believe in that was bigger than human cruelty." Nora sensed there was more to the story darkness he wasn't sharing. "And did you find it?" "Not all at once." His voice grew softer. "It's a journey I'm still on." A particularly violent gust of wind rattled the window panes. Nora jumped slightly and Nathan was immediately alert. "Just the storm," she said, embarrassed by her reaction. But Nathan was already on his feet, moving to the window with the quiet vigilance of a man accustomed to danger. He peered out into the darkness, body tense. "What is it?" Nora asked, alarmed by his posture. "Probably nothing," he replied, though his hand had moved to his holster. "Thought I saw movement beyond the corral." Nora joined him at the window, but saw only sheets of rain illuminated occasionally by lightning flashes. "The cattle will be huddled in the south corner out of the wind." It wasn't cattle. His voice was grim. "Someone's out there." As if to confirm his suspicion, a distant crack echoed through the night, a sound different from thunder, sharper and more focused. "Gunshot," Nathan said, dousing the lanterns with swift efficiency. "Stay away from the windows." In the sudden darkness, with only the fire providing dim illumination, Nora felt fear creep up her spine. Whitmore's men, most likely. Nathan checked his revolver. "They're using the storm as cover." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Something thudded against the cabin wall. "They're not just warning now," Nora whispered, reaching for her rifle. Nathan's hand covered hers. "This is my fight too." Their eyes met in the firelight. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. A volley of shots peppered the cabin, splintering wood and shattering one of the small windows. Nathan pulled Nora to the floor, shielding her body with his own. "We need to get to better cover," he said, his breath warm against her cheek. "The root cellar, does it have another exit?" "Yes, a hatch that leads out behind the smokehouse." "Good. We're going there. Stay low." With Nathan leading the way, they crawled to the trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. Nora lifted it, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. Nathan insisted she go first while he provided cover. The root cellar was cool and smelled of earth and stored vegetables. Nathan joined her moments later, pulling the trapdoor shut behind them. "They'll burn the cabin," Nora whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Everything I have." "Things can be rebuilt," Nathan replied, finding her hand in the darkness. "You're what matters." His touch anchored her, calming the panic rising in her chest. They remained still, listening to the muffled sounds of men shouting above them. Then came the distinctive smell of smoke. "They've set the fire," Nathan confirmed grimly. "We need to move." The escape hatch was narrow but serviceable. Nathan pushed it open cautiously, peering out into the stormy night. "I count 3 men Hargrove and 2 others, not the sheriff." "Mackenzie's too smart to dirty his hands directly," Nora said bitterly. "We need to get to the barn. Your horse still there?" "Yes, and yours too," Nathan nodded. "On my signal, run for the barn, stay low and don't look back." "What about you?" His hand squeezed hers. "I'll be right behind you." The rain had eased somewhat, but the wind still howled. Nora could see her cabin now engulfed in flames, the fire defying the dampness to consume her home. Grief threatened to overwhelm her, but Nathan's steady presence kept her focused. "Now," he whispered. Nora ran, splashing through puddles, her heart pounding. A shout went up they'd been spotted. Gunshots cracked through the air. She reached the barn door and yanked it open, diving inside. Nathan appeared seconds later, blood streaming from his arm. "You're hit," she gasped. "Just grazed." "Saddle the horses, quick." Working together, they prepared the animals while bullets thudded into the barn walls. Nora's hands shook, but years of ranch work had made certain tasks instinctual. "We can't outrun them in this weather," she said, securing her bedroll. "We don't need to outrun them. Just reach the highlands." Nathan tightened his saddle cinch. "I know a place where we can defend ourselves until help comes." "What help? Who would come for us?" Nathan paused, meeting her eyes. "Do you trust me, Nora?" The question hung between them, weighted with significance beyond their current danger. Despite everything, the brevity of their acquaintance, the mystery that still surrounded him, Nora found the answer came easily. "Yes, I trust you." Something changed in his expression, then a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Then let's ride." They burst from the barn at a gallop, Nathan leading the way toward the rocky hills that marked the eastern boundary of the ranch. Shots followed them, but the darkness and driving rain made accurate aim impossible. Nora didn't look back as they rode. She couldn't bear to see her home, her father's legacy, reduced to ashes behind her. Instead, she focused on Nathan's broad back ahead of her, following him into the unknown. They rode hard for nearly an hour, climbing steadily into the rugged terrain. The storm gradually moved eastward, leaving them in its wake. When Nathan finally signaled a halt, they had reached a sheltered overhang of rock with a view of the valley below. "We'll rest the horses here," he said, dismounting. "We should be safe until morning." Nora slid from her saddle, her legs trembling with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. Now that they had stopped, the reality of what had happened crashed over her. "They burned my home," she said, her voice hollow. "Everything's gone." Nathan moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "Not everything. You're alive. The land is still there, and Whitmore just made a serious mistake." "What do you mean?" "Arson and attempted murder are hanging offenses in the territory. When we reach town and report what happened, even Sheriff Mackenzie won't be able to protect Whitmore's men. You think anyone will believe us? Whitmore owns half the businesses in town." Despair colored her words. "Not everyone can be bought." Nathan winced as he removed his duster, revealing the blood-stained sleeve beneath. "And I sent a telegraph to an old friend before I came to your ranch. He'll be waiting in Silver Creek." Nora helped him to a seated position beneath the overhang. "Let me see your arm." As she tended his wound, a deep graze that had bled freely, but wasn't life-threatening, she processed his words. "You suspected trouble before you even arrived." Nathan grimaced as she cleaned the wound with water from her canteen. "I heard rumors in town. Whitmore's been bragging about how he'll own the entire valley by summer's end. When I learned your father had passed and you were alone, I connected the dots. So you came to warn me, and to help if you'd let me." His eyes met hers. "Your father once told me that debt is a chain that binds a man's soul. I owed him my life." Nora secured a bandage around his arm. "And now I owe you mine. You owe me nothing." His voice softened. "Being with you these past days has been payment enough." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Nora found herself unable to look away from his face, illuminated by the moonlight now breaking through the dissipating clouds. "Why?" she asked simply. Nathan seemed to understand the question behind the question. "Because you're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met. Because you face each day on your terms, asking for nothing but what you've earned. Because—" He hesitated, then continued more softly. "Because from the moment I saw you standing on that porch with your rifle, I knew you were someone worth knowing." The honesty in his voice touched something deep within her, a place that had been closed off since her father's death. Perhaps longer. "I've never been good with words," she admitted, "or with letting people in. You don't need to be good with words, just be yourself." Nathan reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That's more than enough." The tenderness of the gesture nearly undid her. Nora had held herself together through her mother's death, through the years of watching her father grow older alone, through his funeral and the lonely months that followed. She had not allowed herself the luxury of breaking. But here, in this moment, with this man who had appeared in her life with a Bible and memories of her father, the walls she had built crumbled. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent at first, then accompanied by deep, racking sobs. Nathan didn't speak. He simply gathered her against his chest, his good arm around her shoulders, holding her as the grief she'd suppressed finally found release. She cried for her father, for her lost home, for all the years of solitude she had endured. When the tears finally subsided, Nora remained within the circle of his embrace, drawing comfort from his steady heartbeat beneath her cheek. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Never apologize for feeling," he replied, his voice a rumble she could feel through his chest. "It's what makes us human." They sat in silence for a long while, watching as the clouds parted to reveal a sky brilliant with stars. Despite everything, the danger, the loss, the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Nora felt a strange peace settle over her. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "We rest. At dawn, we ride for Silver Creek. My friend will help us bring the law down on Whitmore and his men. And after," Nathan's hand found hers in the darkness, "after is for you to decide, Nora. Your land is still yours. You can rebuild. It would take money I don't have. Then we'll find a way." The certainty in his voice was like a lifeline. "If that's what you want." Nora turned to face him. "What about what you want?" In the moonlight, his expression was open, vulnerable. "What I want is to be wherever you are, if you'll have me." The simple declaration stole her breath. "You've known me a week, Nathan. Sometimes a week is enough to know your own heart." His eyes held hers. "I've wandered most of my life, Nora, never felt connected to anyone or any place. Until now. Until you." The truth of his words resonated within her. This connection between them had formed swiftly, but ran deep like a river finding its natural course. "I'm not easy to live with," she warned. A smile touched his lips. "Neither am I. And I won't be the kind of wife who sits at home while you make all the decisions." "I would expect nothing less." "Wife," she echoed, realizing what she'd said. Nathan's smile widened. "Is that an offer?" Nora Sullivan. Despite everything, the attack, their precarious situation, the uncertainty of the future, Nora found herself smiling back. "Maybe it is, Nathan Everett. Maybe it is." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Nora met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they parted, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever comes tomorrow, we face it together." Nora nodded, feeling for the first time since her father's death that she wasn't alone. Together. They rode into Silver Creek the next morning, determined and united. Nathan's friend turned out to be a federal marshal investigating land fraud across the territory. With his help, they brought charges against Whitmore and his men. Sheriff Mackenzie, faced with overwhelming evidence and federal scrutiny, resigned his position rather than face prosecution. The trial was swift by frontier standards. Whitmore was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison for orchestrating the attack. Hargrove and his companions received 10 years each for arson and attempted murder. Rebuilding the Sullivan Ranch took time. Neighbors and townspeople, freed from Whitmore's influence, came together to raise a new cabin on the foundation of the old. It was larger than before, with a proper bedroom and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. Nathan and Nora married that autumn, as golden leaves drifted from the cottonwoods along the creek. The ceremony was simple, held outdoors beneath the same oak tree where Nathan had first appeared with his Bible. That Bible now sat on a shelf in their new home, a reminder of how they met and the faith that had brought them together. Each evening, they would sit on the porch, sometimes reading from its pages, sometimes simply enjoying the sunset in companionable silence. 3 years later, as spring once again turned the valley green, Nora sat in a rocking chair on that porch, their infant daughter sleeping in her arms. Nathan worked in the corral nearby, breaking a spirited young horse with patient determination. "She's finally asleep," Nora called softly when he approached, wiping sweat from his brow. Nathan smiled, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on their daughter's head, then one on Nora's lips. "She's stubborn like her mother." "And thoughtful like her father," Nora countered with a smile. They had named her Hope, a testament to what had blossomed between them in the most unlikely of circumstances. As the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant hues, Nathan settled beside his family, his arm around Nora's shoulders. The ranch was thriving under their combined care. The cattle herd had doubled in size, and they'd added horses to their stock. The land that Nora had fought so hard to keep had rewarded their perseverance. "Any regrets?" Nathan asked, a question he posed occasionally, always with the same hint of wonder that she had chosen him. Nora looked from their sleeping daughter to the man, beside her the stranger who had appeared outside her cabin with a Bible, whom she had joined without saying a word. The man who had become her partner, her lover, her best friend. "Not a single one," she answered truthfully, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Not a single one,"